the reason that I got my first camera is so stupid because my sister got given a camera for her birthday when she was like, I think 10. And then one day, like, someone shot a deer in the field behind our house. I remember being like fascinated by it and taking like 20 pictures of it on her camera. And then obviously, like, as kids, we were like are allowed one roll of film like every month or something. Well, I didn't even have a camera. And so my sister got her roll of film developed because she didn't know what was on it. And then obviously got a roll of film of like 20 dead deer. 20 pictures of dead deer. And so my parents got me a camera for my birthday because they were like, yeah, you should probably have your own camera if you're gonna take pictures of dead deer on your sister's camera. So
Here you
and
go, you
then
little psychopath. You.
and that was the last one.
Our guest today is Hugh Whitaker. Hugh is a photographer from England, best known for his incredible, candid, emotional, and documentary style wedding photography. To me, his personal work is especially breathtaking, capturing the human spirit and our world through beautifully composed and thoughtful images. In this podcast, we dive into his love for surfing, the fact that his current home is the first time he has lived anywhere for more than a year, his escapades traveling around the world on a cruise ship that almost burned down, but more on that later, how AI will impact the photography industry, and so much more. Hugh is truly a man who lives life on his own terms and is someone we can all learn from. His knowing smile, quick wit, and love for life are incredibly contagious, and we hope to talk to him many more times in the future. This is the Ilienfero Podcast. Now, without further ado, here's Hugh Whitaker.
How's your vacation?
It was good. It was so good. Yeah, it's funny because I went down there with the intention of shooting a bit as well, and I feel like I did nothing but surf. So it was like, yeah, it was incredible.
Did you become a better surfer over those few months?
Oh yeah, I feel like whenever I surf that much over a period, I always get like a bunch fitter and um yeah, work on stuff that I need to work on, and then yeah, it's good. It's just nice being in warm water as well. The first day I got back here, I went for a surf, and it's like immediately that water hits you in the face, and you're just like, oh, I can't, why am I here? Yeah, it was good. It's also when you're
That's
in a
great.
wetsuit, you're so the wetsuits are so thick that you float so much more. So
Hmm.
down south when you like dive under a big wave, you just like disappear under it. Here, when you like try and dive under because your wetsuit kind of floats you, you go to dive under and it just like you just get like all caught up in the wave and stuff. And so it's then like adjusting back to like surfing colder, like yeah, water.
That's fascinating. I actually wondered what that would be like if you surf. Like, I mean, I don't think there's any waves in the Dead Sea, but like, what would happen if like you had a wetsuit on at the Dead Sea? Like, you'd just be above the waves. Like, you don't
Yeah,
even need to
like
surf them.
yeah, and actually that's super interesting because boards have a certain volume. Basically, you want to be able to float your weight, so everyone has a slightly different volume board. And then the better you get, the lower volume board. So when you paddle into a wave, if you're new, you have a board that has a lot of volume, so it sits right on the surface, so it catches the wave easily. But then the more you surf, you have like a much smaller board. But when I used to surf in Ontario, there's no salt because it's in the lakes. And so
Hmm.
the boards that you use on the lakes have to have more flotation than on the ocean. And so, yeah, and the other thing is
Interesting.
in Costa Rica, there's more salt in the ocean than there is here. So then you have that. So then there's so many different variables on different oceans. But yeah, the Dead Sea will be so bizarre because you just sit right on top. Yeah.
Do you need like would you use a different board to surf here than you would in Costa Rica?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And
Interesting. How would you like? What would the difference be? Like if somebody who has never surfed, like, would they be able to tell the difference between the two, or is that kind of the same thing for them? And it's just because you're so good at it at this point, like you know the difference.
I think you can roughly tell the difference. The other thing is you often have a different board for like different waves. So you'll have a different board for like a different wave height. Like a on a bigger wave, you want to be able to paddle into it a little earlier. So you want like a board that will paddle faster. And then on a
Oh, interesting.
smaller wave, you can go with a board that it doesn't matter if you like paddle into it a bit later. So yeah, so there's so much variety depending on like waves and like wave height and how fit you are as well. And so sometimes when I'm fitter, then I'll surf a different board than so for instance, when I had COVID and I went back, I surfed a board that I used to surf a couple of years ago a lot because I was like, there's no way I can surf the boards that I'm like fitter on. So yeah, there's so much variety in boards, and it can be like minutest differences. Like if you look at a pro surfer's set of boards, they'll have 6 boards. They all look exactly the same, but all 6 of those boards are like completely different to them.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Because that's what I always thought. Like I thought, like you just have one board. Like I never, I don't know why. It's like I guess in every other sport, it's like golf, you have like 15 clubs. Like anything, you usually have like more than one of those.
Yeah.
But it's like for some reason surfing, as you mentioned, it's like they'll look the same. I know there's like bigger, smaller, depending on like if you're like younger or if you're older. But I never thought there was like so many boards that like a professional would have, for example, based on all the things that you just mentioned.
Yeah. And it becomes a bit of addiction as well because then you have like different boards for different wave heights, etc. But even for the way you surf. So some days if I'm feeling like really energetic, then I know that I want to surf like more aggressively. And some days if I'm feeling mellow, then I know I want to surf in a mellow way. So then that then changes your board as well. So yeah. So then the problem is when you surf is that you end up just every time like you see a board, you're like, I kind of want to know what that surf's like. So you just end up buying like so many boards. So my shed is full of boards here, and it's just like it becomes a bit ridiculous. It becomes a bit of an obsession. But yeah.
So what do you mean by like surfing a wave in a mellow way and an aggressive way? Like, what's the difference?
So even where you sit on a wave, if you sit really close to where the whitewater, it's much steeper, and so you have to surf it much faster, and you're much more aggressive in the way you make turns. Whereas if you surf further down the wave away from the whitewater, it's not as steep, so then you can make kind of like more mellow turns. You can just kind of drift along. If you watch videos of surfers, you'll see how some people are like really aggressive in the way they surf and like very fast, and other people are just like very like smooth and mellow. And then yeah, they both ride completely different boards.
Interesting.
Very interesting. I also saw that you did a podcast when you got back. So is that the new gig? You're just appearing on podcast.
I know. It's funny because someone else asked me to do one as well in like a couple of weeks' time, and I'm like, this is what I do now. I don't shoot anymore. I'm just gonna be on podcast. Yeah, it's funny.
How'd you? So was that the first one that you did? Like the one that you just did?
I think it probably was actually. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because I feel like during the pandemic that was the time for podcasts, and then I just hunkered down. But yeah, so I think that was the first time. Yeah, it's funny.
How'd you find it?
Not too bad actually. I used to speak at conferences before the pandemic and stuff, and so I don't really mind. I feel like comes kind of naturally. How long have you been doing this now?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Depending on how you ask the question. So we initially started I guess like a year ago or so.
About a year.
And we did 2 episodes, and we're like, we're gonna do one a month, and then we just didn't do one a month, and then because it got super busy. But what we're doing this time around, like literally one of the goals for the year was to build out the podcast, just because it's so much fun talking to people. It's like we get to learn things. It's like just the whole thing is really fun. This time around we're like hunkering down on it, and I think we like this week your second podcast, and the next week we get 2 more. So it's like
Sweet.
For the busy season, we
3
hopefully
more.
Yeah. So for the busy season, hopefully like we have a bunch of them lined up. So even if we don't have anything in a month, like we can still put something out.
Yeah, that's super smart. Yeah, because I feel like the consistency of it, then you get consistent people listening and kind of tuning into it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually interesting though. I had a conversation yesterday with a guy who he like runs a company that basically produces like corporate podcasts.
Yeah.
And he has his own podcast is in the top 0.5% of all podcasts in the world.
Seriously?
Which is insane.
Yeah.
But he's on like the lower end of that scale. So at the top you have people like Joe Rogan who's getting like 12 million listeners every time he posts something. And then at the bottom of that 0.5 is him, and he gets like 50,000 downloads a month, which is like that's a lot of people.
Significant.
Still. Yeah, it's very significant. But he's like, so for example, I mean with Joe who signed that $100 million deal with Spotify, you got that, but then you got him who's making like just enough money doing ad reads and stuff to like pay off his car insurance for the month or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting because it's such a small percentage of people that make money from podcasting, and so like even in that 0.5% at the 0.4, 0.5 versus the 0.1, there's such a significant difference in income.
Yeah. I find that in a lot of industries, though, when I was doing stock photography, it was the same. There would be like, there's a million photos in the library, obviously more than like how many million photos in the library. And you'd find that the top 250 photos were making like 80% of the income for that stock library. And it would just be like,
That's
and then
crazy.
all the stuff in the bottom, and the photographers as well. If there was like, I don't know, 1,000 photographers in there, you'd have 5 who were making money, or like making like good money, and then you'd have probably like 30, 40 who are making enough to like pay their mortgage, and then the rest would be like making like $10 a month.
That's so fascinating.
It's so crazy, yeah.
Actually, speaking about stock photography, I know back in the day when stock photography was a big deal, and I guess probably some people probably still make money off stock, but probably not nearly as much as it used to be. Can you talk a bit about your experience in stock photography and kind of everything and anything that you can speak on in terms of that?
Yeah, it's funny now because I feel like with the way Midjourney is going right now, like stock photography is done. Like I feel like the last update of Midjourney probably like put the final nail in the coffin for stock photography. I got into it at a time that it was okay, but the people so when I left, I went to school for photography, and when I left school, I interned with a couple of photographers, and they had been doing stock photography for a while, but they were doing it in the days when the internet wasn't really such a thing. So they would basically have like these massive books of like stock images. So they shoot stuff, and then like Getty would produce this giant book, and then Getty would take that around to like all the businesses, and people would buy photos out of it. But in those days, they were making like, a single image sale would be 25, 30K if it was for advertising.
Oh, wow.
It was insane. And so certain images, so they were making like 500,000 a year easy. And then obviously it gradually, as the internet kind of evolved and there was more access to like posting photos online, and you had like, there was a lot of cheaper agencies came in that were selling images for like $5 a pop. And so it kind of diluted it down. But I mean, some of those guys were still making good money. But by the time I came in, it was like a few steps down from that. And so it was good. I mean, there was a couple of years where I traveled and shot stock photography and like did odd jobs on the side, but it largely like supported my like bum lifestyle effectively. Like it wasn't great money, but I mean it was so easy to like, to just set up a shoot of like a wellness shoot, and then you'd probably sell like 30 images. I think the most I ever made out of an image was 5K, which was like decent for one image.
Oh, wow.
But then it like now, and I think I still probably have 1,000 pictures in like various different libraries, but sometimes like I'll make $100 every 6 months. And it's just like the way it just like dropped was crazy. And I know there's some people who still do it. But I think you have to produce like, I don't know, 30, 40,000 images a year in order to like break even and make some money. And to me, it's just like not worth it. But it was fun while it lasted. I think for the generation before me, like those guys were just like laughing. It was such a good industry.
I mean, sounds like it. 25, 30K an image. I mean, who would say no to that?
It was crazy. And some of the images I knew had sold for that amount. Like one of the guys I worked for, like some of the images, they were often not like for like super simple images. Like he used to shoot a lot of ski stuff. And so he'd go skiing for a week, take up like some models with him, and then they would like produce all this content, and that content would give him like 6 months income for like 2 weeks of like, it was just ridiculous. Yeah. But yeah, no,
we need to go back in time.
I know. Yeah. But it's so funny.
That's
I remember
crazy.
they had in the studio, they had one of the original like Getty Image like stock photography books, and it was just funny like flicking through it and thinking that that's how people would buy stock photography. Like now it's so different. Yeah.
Yeah,
you ever thought?
I don't know why. I've never even thought about that.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about doing stock video?
It's one of those things that I feel like kind of like how people do it with stock photography, where it's like we have so much footage that we've never used, but we're so lazy to actually go out there and upload it, because it's like it takes so much time to go find the right ones and all that stuff. So it's like that's why we never like we considered it, but then we
Yeah.
were like, I'm probably like we could probably be spending our time in better ways than uploading footage for days at a time.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny too because like the last couple of years we've been like, you know what? Once it gets to the end of the year, we'll take some easy time and we'll spend time uploading a bunch of footage and it'll be fine. And then that time of year comes and you're like, nope, I don't want to
Yeah.
do
It's
that.
like we'll do it next year, you know?
Yeah, I know that feeling. Yeah. Because I think
And
that that's the only place there's still a bit of money. Because I feel like AI like video isn't yet a thing.
for now,
But now I
have
know.
you?
Yeah.
It's actually funny enough. Speaking on that, literally the other day I was on Instagram, and like this thing popped up on my feed, and I was like, oh, I wonder what that is. I looked it up, and it's literally like an AI generated videos, like stock videos. And I
Really?
was like, well, I guess our time has come as well when it comes to stock videos. It's pretty crazy.
It's nuts. Yeah.
Have you been playing around with Midjourney a lot?
I did go and play around. I wanted to like see. I wanted to demystify it for myself because I feel like
Hmm.
there's people I know who are like calling themselves prompt engineers and like are like creating this business and I was talking to someone and they were saying how it's actually really complicated to do and everything and I was like so I went to play and see and I mean it's it's so basic to like create a good image. Have you played with it?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
also for anybody who doesn't know, Midjourney is an AI where you put in prompts and you generate images, and it's gotten quite popular over the last little bit. But yeah, Ben and I I think we started playing around with like as soon as it came out, like
Yeah.
in the second rendition when it was still like really shitty, and we put in things in, and you're like, wow, this is like not that good. It's
Yeah.
like what's all this about? But then I've definitely seen like people putting in like the same prompts from like the second generation to like now the fifth generation, and
Yeah.
it's crazy. Like some of the images I'm like, this is like legit realistic. Like I would not be able to tell the difference between that and a real photo.
Oh,
And I can't even
100%.
imagine what it's going to be like in the next like few months to few years. But it's really really cool, honestly. It's kind of interesting because as you mentioned, it's like you have to really know prompts to be able to still get like exactly the image that you're looking for, because I feel like that's the complicated part.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very fascinating, honestly.
Yeah, I think there's like a big difference between just getting something cool. Like I've seen people get something really cool by typing in like one that I saw was like uh if if you put a sloth on the cover of Vogue, and it was like this really
Yeah.
like artsy image of a sloth, and then they had the Vogue thing, and I was like, this legit looks exactly like that. And it's just funny little prompts like that can end up generating something really cool.
Yeah.
But then like if you want to get super exact with it, I know some people have developed like the craft to be able to make like storyboards, for example, for video
Yeah.
production, and to be able to get the exact same style and the exact same kind of mood, um, but with having your characters do different things within the same scene. I think
Yeah.
there's like a real sort of engineering aspect, I get prompt engineering aspect to something like that.
But it's
Yeah.
pretty cool. I mean,
Yeah.
we the one thing we definitely have been kind of curious about is storyboarding, because that's kind of a big one where if we want to be able to share an idea with people, with clients, it's like how can we, like, we have no idea how to draw. Like if there's one thing we have no idea how to do and there's no way we'll ever get into is like trying to make storyboards. But we tried it a while back in version 3, and even then it's like some of the things that it came up with, it's like this is like pretty close to what we're looking for. So it's like I definitely see there's a lot of potential when it comes to stuff like that. But how do you see it when it comes to, because I mean you do photography, so what is it like for you seeing all those images pop up and them being so realistic?
Yeah. So it's funny because I feel like it was until version 5 that I like really took it as like anything, and then version 5 came out, and like I mean, it's hard to distinguish. Like that picture of the Pope in that coat. Did you see that?
Yeah,
Like I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was AI at first, and that's the thing is you genuinely can't tell. Like it's so good. Um, and I love the idea of using it for storyboarding. I think that's such a good use for it. I think for me, there's a couple of different like feelings. One of them is that it's because it's used imagery without permission. like I feel there's a
Hmm.
little there's especially as like that obviously directly harms our industry. I feel a little bit of like negativity towards it in that respect. Um, I do, yeah, I do think it's an incredible tool, and I agree. Like, it's hard to create imagery well to like actually, unless you're just putting certain prompts to actually get certain images. I think as photographers, it's easier because obviously you understand like backlighting, like composition, that you can give it the terms it needs. Um, for me, if I was still in stock photography and that was my main income, I think I would be like so scared. Like I would, and I know someone who is a copywriter who just basically completely switched their career. That when ChatGPT came out, they were like this is now. I know in like 2 years' time, I'm not going to have a job, so there's no point me continuing to do this. And so they've completely switched their career. For me, I think luckily because most of my income comes from wedding photography and creating moments with people who want those pictures of themselves. I don't think it's ever going to be an issue where it's going to take like work away from me. But I
Hmm.
very much think like mainstream commercial photography, it's a serious hit. I mean, even like Levi's just announced that from this point forward, they're only using AI models. Um,
Oh, really?
yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so all their ad
That's
campaigns are only
crazy.
going to be AI models because they think it shows the reason they say is because it's a more diverse human, which is like to me is just
Hmm.
such an interesting I'm like, it's because it's
It's
cheaper. It's not because it's a more
yeah.
diverse human. You want a
But
diverse
that's
human, use
that's
humans. Yeah.
That's what I was about to say. It's like, wait, it's how are you diversifying it by not even using people? I guess like
It's so bizarre.
that's so fascinating though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things though as well that which I've been kind of looking into as well, as people are saying that. And again, I feel like it's so hard to wrap your mind around the fact that like how good AI actually is if you haven't actually like played around with it, especially ChatGPT, Midjourney, and there's so many other ones too. Like for example, like we use Descript for our podcast, which literally takes the video version and just literally like scripts everything. So it's like we literally have like if we want to go to a specific spot and like make a clip out of it, then we just go to where you're saying it because we have it in writing, and then like we go there, we put in like a point to start, point to end, bam, you have a clip. It's like you don't need to
Yeah.
go scroll through the whole thing just to go find a good clip, uh, and stuff like that. So it's yeah, it's just like so fascinating how that works, and it's in a way it's terrifying too because you're like,
Yeah.
which part of the creative is it gonna hit next? It's like copywriting, for example, is a big one, or it's like website development even. Because with
Yeah.
this new rendition of ChatGPT 4, it's like you can literally, I don't know if you saw this video, but it's like somebody drew how they want their website to look, like super shitty drawing too. It's like literally just like squares on like a piece of paper, and they took a picture of that, put it into ChatGPT, and said like, make me a website that looks like this, and it did, and it's like, holy, it's like that is insane.
It's so crazy. Yeah. Yeah. I kind of hope it leaves room for humans to still be creative. Like it would just be interesting to see how it gets used overall. But I think the thing we're going to find is that we're going to get hit with like an onslaught of content. Because I mean, even like for the back end of a website, like doing SEO, I mean, you can just get it to write all your SEO and you can put in like, 100 SEO pages on the back of your website in like a day, which before would have taken like months of work. And I think that's the interesting thing is that it's just going to be like newspaper articles. There's a surf magazine which has started writing articles by recycling old articles and
Hmm.
then and just writing it just so they're getting like links. Because I mean, at the end of the day, all they want is the advertising dollars. And so if they're
right.
like, getting prominent, like it's showing up in the right place, it's getting enough clicks on the ads, then they're getting paid, and that's all they really care about. And I think that's where we're going to see like a decline in like most content is just going to be like borderline unreadable. Well, readable, but just dull. But hopefully then there's room for like creative people on top. I don't know. It's fascinating. Yeah.
Well, I did watch an interview with the guy with the CEO of OpenAI, and he was saying that he thinks the jobs that are safest are the creative industry jobs because of the fact that at least in his opinion, he believes that there's something about human behavior. Sometimes we're just like so illogical.
Yeah.
There's just something. There's no rationale a lot of the time behind something that might pop into your mind, or or whatever it might be, that he feels like that's irreplaceable.
Yeah. I hope so,
Yeah.
but then I also feel like already watching how good AI is at like matching like human minds, whether you just like be like, hey, be a little more irrational in what you give us and a little more logical, and then it's going to turn out something like a little more creative. Like, I mean, do you know what I mean? There's just
I
no
mean, it's
like,
funny too because I've
yeah,
I've played around with that type of stuff too because we've tried whenever we were trying to work on our like narrative, I guess narrative film commercial that we did over the first few months of the year. It's like we were playing around with ChatGPT trying to see like what type of ideas we can get just because it's fascinating. And again, it's like some of them were very basic, but it's like depending on how you put things, like you'd be like, this is like a really fascinating idea. It's like, again, it's like you can't take that idea just yet and like do something with it because you're like, it's still fairly basic, but it's like you can start working off of it. So it's like you're saving a lot of time potentially by not thinking in a way from scratch, but it's like you already have a general idea and you can just kind of work from there. So it's gonna be very fascinating. Actually, I
yeah,
have a question for you.
yeah, go on.
If right now let's say you were in your 20s and you started in the job markets, what would you do with all the information you have?
I would still do wedding photography. It took me a long time to come to wedding photography. So because I went to school for photography and then I thought I wanted to do architectural photography and then I wanted to do advertising photography and then I stopped photography for a bit. But I feel like of all of those, wedding photography has been the most satisfying. There's so many reasons. I love that you can put so much creativity in it. You also know like your jobs are so lined up. So unless something like the pandemic happens, you have that like I know how much money I'm gonna make this year. And so I know whether I have to like panic, push more, find something else. Whereas I feel like for you it's a lot tougher because suddenly you got a job like 2 weeks before. And so there's the consistency of it, but also I feel the job safety is good because again, things like AI shouldn't touch it. I don't think. But yeah, anyway, I'm
Unless
just
you
trying
have
to think
like
of
a
a way that
Hugh
it's possible.
yeah,
But
it's like a Hugh robot. Like it just like
just like wanders
it's like
around.
this. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
it takes a video and then from that video it can just like take photos away from that wedding. I don't know.
I
It's
mean, you
like
could potentially it's like it's possible. Like it really is.
yeah, I guess honestly, over the last like few months, I learned that anything is possible. It's like whatever you think the future is, like it's not that far away.
Yeah,
Well, the other
I
thing
know.
too, I think, is that one other thing the CEO of OpenAI said is that there might be a lot of jobs that no longer exist because of AI, but that happens with every technological revolution,
Hmm.
and different jobs get created then because of it.
Totally.
So like in 50 years when we're all old and gray, like it could just be that people are working the same amount as they're working today, but like the job market will be completely unrecognizable.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can totally see that. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's just funny different ways to work with it and use it. I feel like it was streamlined down so many jobs though. I mean, you could theoretically with AI, you could do if you're controlling, you could do the work of like 5 people. Like it's
Yeah.
uh
I
yeah.
mean, and the thing that I've heard as well for now at least, and that's probably gonna change very soon. But like for example, ChatGPT. Like let's say I'm not the best writer, right? And I'll admit that Ben is a great writer. So it's like if we're writing something, Ben is writing it. But if I'm doing like even a post on our website or like a LinkedIn post or anything like that, it's like I've been using ChatGPT for all of it because I'm like I can use it as a base and like change up probably a few things, and within a few minutes I have a great post that's written better than I can write.
So
But
true,
what it's
yeah.
saying, like what people are saying now, it's like if you are a great writer, then ChatGPT is not there yet. But if you're a good writer, then ChatGPT can 100% replace you. So it's
Yeah.
like we've been using it for like the basic things of like again writing articles or kind of even writing an email in like a specific way. Like we've played around with even like our monthly emails. Like we would make it like on our last one, for example, we made it like a rhyme everything, and it's
Yeah.
like people are like, "Oh, this is so cool and creative," and I was like, "Yeah, but like that's not. It's not even me writing it. It's like it's ChatGPT doing all the work."
Yeah.
And it's like, of course, you have to change all the things and make sure that it all is sound and well and give it the idea. But it's like other than that, it's like it's really really cool to see what it can do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so
One one
fascinating.
thing one thing I'm a little worried about, Hugh, like you're talking about streamlining jobs and stuff like that, and I'm honestly kind of worried that it's just gonna turn like human brains to mush. Like we're just
Yes.
not gonna know how to do anything anymore because we're just gonna be like, oh, just put it into ChatGPT or just whatever other AI programs come out, and like you're gonna have no problem solving skills, no like knowledge of the basic like how to basically function in society without AI.
Yeah.
But what about because funny enough, there was actually a thing that I read recently as well. Like that kind of happens every time like a technological advance occurs. Like for example, when the calculator first came out, like professors went on the streets to rally, being like, "This is our students are going to be useless. Like we're all
Yeah.
just going to use calculators and stuff." And like look at everybody now. It's like everybody uses calculators, and like you still have to do other things. It just made one thing a lot simpler.
Yeah. But
So
also,
it's
I feel
yeah,
like
it's
because then you also have the thing whereas now, like, if we want to know something, we just go to Google and we like Google it, right? And we've been doing that for like how many years now? But we now have so much useless information in our heads because we're like constantly like, oh, I wonder how that works. So you Google it. So I wonder also whether we're just gonna like overcomplicate our minds as well. Like it'll be so interesting to see like, yeah, 10, 20 years time, like exactly how humanity is like handling it.
Well, I've actually seen in North America, the average IQ over the last 30 years has gone down by I think like 11 or 12 points.
Really?
So, yeah.
but
That's
ChatGPT's IQ has gone up by 12 to 13 points.
oh, it's so funny because did you watch the movie Her? Have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Have you
love
seen
that
it?
movie.
I've
It's
not
so
no.
Okay. Yeah.
oh, it's so beautifully shot. It's yeah,
Yeah.
the light and the colors and like just yeah, it's a beautiful movie. But it's funny because I feel like that was so like everyone was like when that came out, everyone was kind of horrified about how that could ever be a reality, and now it just is. Like,
Well,
like
that's what I mean. Yeah.
it's yeah, it's so strange. Yeah.
It's
Anyway.
Ilya. It's basically about a guy who falls in love with
Oh yeah,
a
like
robot, like
yeah,
a
yeah,
but like a voice. Like she doesn't have a physical manifestation.
Yeah.
And
yeah. I think
yeah.
I've heard about yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now that you're mentioning
Yeah.
that, I don't think there's that many movies that are similar to that. So
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Oh,
I'd
yeah, it's so
watch it purely
fascinating.
for like the cinematography, the soundtrack is like I would put it in one of my top like 20 like visual
Oh,
movies. It's beautiful.
what are in the top three?
Oh, that's a good one. I like it's been my favorite movie forever, but have you seen the movie A Single Man? I actually spoke about this on the podcast I was on the other day. I feel like I'm like
Oh,
oh
that's
really?
funny.
podcast polluting, whatever. Um, yeah, have you seen A Single Man or Nocturnal Animals?
No.
So Tom Ford.
Nocturnal Animals I have seen.
Okay, cool. So Single Man was the
Yeah.
first one he did. Um,
Okay.
and then so it's Tom Ford directed both of them. And they are like so visually stunning. Like the soundtracks are amazing. Some of the compositions and like and also I feel like because he's so like he's oh if you look at his fashion, it's also crisp and like sharp and like clean lines and like
Hmm.
ordered. And both movies are like that. They're just like everything is so considered and perfect. Um, he does in A Single Man, he does this really cool thing where when the main character, Colin Firth, kind of gets happy or like gets filled with like joy, then the movie goes really like saturated or like warm oranges. And whenever it's like he's sad or like kind of like down, then it goes to very cold blues. And it's quite subtle. But it's just like it's one of those things which I'd never seen done in a movie before. And it's just really like your viewing experience really changes with his like colors, which is so fascinating. But yeah, then Nocturnal Animals, like there's a couple of compositions in there. Like I have a photo of like screenshots of compositions from that movie because they're just like so incredible. The light is so beautiful. But yeah, I would definitely I feel like Nocturnal Animals is a disturbing movie.
A very disturbing movie. Yep.
Yeah,
I
it's
agree. Yeah.
A Single Man is less disturbing. It's a much more emotionally beautiful movie. I feel like Nocturnal Animals, like I always want to watch it, but I almost just want to watch it with the sound off and just watch the screenshots. Because there's points in it where I'm just like, I remember starting to watch it with my partner Kayla, and she was like, "Yeah, I don't think I want to watch this." And then I was like, "Yeah, I'm really not feeling it now. You have to be in like a certain mood to watch it." Yeah,
Yeah. I remember like because I had heard such good things about it, and then I watched it, and I was like, this is really good, but I'm just like so depressed now.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's one of those movies which like you want to watch it, but you're just like, yeah, you have to be in a certain place.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need
That's
to watch
funny.
like a real pick me up movie like up after it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just to give our viewers a little background.
Yeah, let's go
I
all
know,
the way to the
yeah,
beginning.
yeah. Let's rewind
Good
this a
point.
little bit. I'm curious how you originally got into photography and what made you decide that it's what you wanted to do for the rest of your life.
And also, just maybe like tell us a bit of a description of before photography and all that stuff, because I mean, from when we chatted, you have a very fascinating life, and you've done so many different things, and I feel like you've done more than like I don't know, you've done a combination of like what 5 people do in a lifetime
Yeah.
in what you've lived so far. So yeah, would love to just get you to share those stories.
Yeah,
A
so
quick overview, maybe.
say again, sorry. A quick overview.
Oh,
Yeah,
I just yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
So I got into photography. When I was young, I think actually the reason that I got my first camera is so stupid because my sister got given a camera for her birthday when she was like I think 10, and then one day like someone shot a deer in the field behind our house. And I remember being like fascinated by it and taking like 20 pictures of it on her camera. And then obviously like as kids we were like are allowed one roll of film like every month or something. Well, I didn't even have a camera. And so my sister got her roll of film developed because she didn't know what was on it. And then obviously got a roll of film of like 20 dead deer, 20 pictures of dead deer. And so my parents got me a camera for my birthday because they were like, yeah, you should probably have your own camera if you're gonna take pictures of dead deer on your sister's camera. So
Here you
and
go, you
then
little psychopath. You.
and that was the last one. I don't think I've ever taken dead animal photos off. You know what you're like when you're a kid.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then
Canada is the perfect place for it. Then it's like you're driving on the road, you stop by, you're like, oh, a squirrel or whatever else there is.
so many dead animals. But then they when I was at school, when I was at school, they had various different activities, and I was always trying to find a way to do the activity that was the least amount of work. And then I discovered that photography was an activity where you could like print your own photos, and so I did that, and then I became hooked on like printing my own work. And so that was when I was 14, I think. And so then I set a darkroom up in my like our bathroom at home, and so then I would just like shoot a lot of landscape photos and print them, and then it just became an obsession from that point. So then I went to school for it, and then when I left school, I luckily got an internship with two photographers who were had a studio in London in the UK, which is where I grew up, and they they and then we did so many fun jobs. Like I feel like we in that period of time like we like traveled so many different places. They used to shoot all the ad campaigns for the British Army, and they shoot various other ad campaigns. And so I basically got to do like a whole bunch of like crazy jobs, which was super fun. And then they were the ones who introduced me to stock photography. And then from that point on, I traveled a lot, and I basically bummed around for quite a few years, just like doing odd jobs, always shooting photos. And then it wasn't until I moved to Canada that I then set up a business, like a wedding photography business, which was kind of then from that point on, which was probably now like 2011, 2012. And so then I've been shooting weddings full time since then with other jobs on the side. But I always like, since I started shooting weddings, I feel like that's always been my like the thing that I enjoy the most. Like I love the access I get to people's lives. Like I just like show up and like, yeah, get to experience what they're doing. And it's kind of, it's a place where I feel I can be more creative than I could. Because I'm not sure if you find this, but when I was shooting advertising photography, I could never, um, like it was always someone else's idea. I guess
Hmm.
you do find that. I guess you have a good mix of work, so you get to do creative stuff as well.
So it honestly really depends because one of the things is like depends how you work as a production company too, because at times like there's a lot of people that will be like, whatever your idea is, I just want to like make it. I don't really care about the idea. I just want to either make the money, or I'm just like really interested in the production itself. Well, for us, the idea is also very important. So it's like for us, we always try and push the boundaries of kind of like that, be right on that line of what the client is happy with, but
Yeah,
it's pushing their limit as well. Because for us, it's not as satisfying if it's not creative, right? So it's like for us,
totally.
like, yeah, we can shoot something and do all this stuff, but it's like, why don't we make it good instead of just average?
Yeah,
So it's definitely kind of depending on the client, really. It's like sometimes, honestly, you want to shut your brain off and just do the thing, and
yeah,
other times you want to be extremely creative if you find that the idea is really cool.
And I
yeah.
think as well, like it depends on if you're working with an agency or not. So with an agency, obviously the creative is always going to be done by them, and then you as a director um, basically submit how you would interpret their creative and have your spin on it.
Yeah.
Um, which I mean, so that kind of allows you some flexibility, but definitely the most rewarding productions are when you can create the concept itself.
Oh, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's kind of what I found with wedding photography is that I can shoot whatever photos I want, as long as I'm largely delivering, you know, pictures of them enjoying their wedding day. But then I can also like just shoot a whole bunch of like random creative stuff that may never even make it to them. But it's kind of like it gives me so much space to play, which is why I'm kind of hooked on it. And yeah, as long as I can shoot weddings, I think I will. Um,
So how what was your experience like shooting your first wedding? How'd you get into like just weddings in general? Because I feel like for a lot of people, weddings is the starting point, but you did a lot of like advertising like before you even got into weddings. So I'd love to know how you get into like what was that first shoot like, and how'd you get into it?
oh God, the first one was such a bizarre wedding. I don't even know how I got the job. But I basically did it for $200, and at this point, I didn't really want to be a wedding photographer. But it was funny because there was so many points during the day where I realized that like even the bride walked into church, I took some pictures, and then she walked down the aisle, and as she walked down the aisle, I was like, oh shit, I should probably be at the top of the aisle, shouldn't I? There was just so many points where I was like, basically, I completely messed up, I feel. And that's the thing about weddings is that you really have to understand what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. And so then after that, I was still shooting stock photography, and then I had a friend who was shooting weddings, and she needed a second photographer. So then at the weekend, I would just go and shoot um, weddings with her. And so yeah, I would second shoot for her, and I feel like at that point, it like basically gave me the chance to see how someone shot, and then like so then it was easy to then pick up my own weddings. So then she started sending me referrals for weddings, and other people sent me referrals, and then it gradually just built from there. Um, So yeah, it was kind of like, but yeah, definitely those first weddings were like so nerve-wracking because I like hadn't got a clue what was going on. And now I feel like a wedding really kind of follows roughly the same script. So as long as you know pretty much where you should be at some points, and sometimes I like to challenge myself by not being in the right place at a certain point, if that makes sense. So I know I should be here, but I know that there's probably like a risky but fun shot here. So sometimes I'll like do that just to yeah, like add another challenge, add some more creativity to it. But yeah, yeah.
Do you ever in those moments, do you ever have kind of like an oh shit, this didn't work the way I thought it would?
Oh, for sure. I feel like there's been so I remember setting up this amazing shot once. The wedding was on the brow of this hill, and the way they were standing from behind, basically they were like silhouettes against the sky with like trees perfectly framing them. And so for the first kiss shot, I was like, if I'm like behind them, then I'll get this amazing shot. But obviously the officiant kind of stands blocking them. And so to the officiant before, I was like, hey, like I have this idea, like I want to shoot this shot. When they kiss, can you like step to one side and then I can like get this perfect shot? And so I had a second shooter as well. This is key. Like I feel like with situations like this, if I don't have a second shooter, I won't take a bigger risk. So the second shooter was in the aisle taking this kiss shot. So anyway, so I'm lying down in this field, like all the way back from the ceremony. the kiss happens and the officiant doesn't move. So so basically, it's like this perfect composition. They're kissing, but then the officiant's head is just blocking both of them. And
Oh,
so, and I'm just lying there being like fuck, just like so bad about it. But my second shooter was in the island and got like a very like normal but like good kiss shot. So it was fine. I still had what I needed to deliver. But it's just and I think that's the key is that the I basically have a line that I know that below it, these are all the photos that I have to deliver. And so I know that the client's expectation is this, but then my expectation for what I want to deliver is up here. So basically, it's this top section where, like, I'll take risks or I'll do things that I've not thought to do before, or like push the boundaries a little, knowing that if I miss it or if it goes wrong, then I've still got what they need. I need to like satisfy them. And so it's always
Right.
that kind of like the added risk is the fun bit, and they'll never know if like there was an amazing shot that didn't work out, as long as they've got all the shots that they actually want. Um,
totally. How like shooting so many weddings. I know like one of the biggest things that we that's always hard to tackle is when you do something for a long time and it's more or less like a similar thing that you're doing is finding new and innovative ways to tackle that problem. So how do you go about finding that extra 10, 20%? Like, do you have an inspiration that you look on like Instagram websites, or like, is it just in the moment you feel like you're like, oh, this would be kind of an interesting, unique shot?
so as far as I feel like there's so many different ways of doing this because it's something that I have struggled with. I think 5 years into me shooting weddings, I got bored, and I'm now 11 years in. And so it was at that point that I was like, okay, I have to figure out a way to like make this creative. And so I do different things. So on some weddings, I'll set a challenge before the wedding that I have to get like a quirky picture of someone's stiletto shoes or something stupid like that. Like not like a guest shoes, or that I like. So I had this period where I was trying to get as many different stories perfectly in a frame composed. So as many different people doing different things in a frame. Or then other times I'll be like, okay, I'm going to try and set myself to like use this type of light only for this part of the day. So I definitely have to set myself challenges within it so that I don't get bored. I also, when I'm editing my work, I make a list of all the things that I think I could do better or differently. And then so the next wedding, then I'll look at that list and then I'll challenge myself to like do those things differently, or like try and do something. Yeah, try and create something different from a shot that if there's one shot that I always take the same, then the next wedding I won't allow myself to take that shot. Like I know that I'll have to say the kiss shot, like I usually shoot it from the aisle. The next wedding, I know that I have to shoot it in a different way. It's definitely, if I didn't do that, then I don't think I could still be doing it. Um,
Right.
yeah.
Um, well, speaking of this, because I feel like this would be an interesting question to kind of follow up on that on, is like you've been shooting, how long have you been shooting now? Like 20, 23, 24 years?
Yeah. Well, since I first started, yeah, I think it was like,
Yeah,
yeah, 25 years ago since I developed my first photo. No, 26 years ago since I developed my first photo.
26 years
Yeah.
ago. So like, I'm curious, when you look back at the work that you've created over that time span, like how do you feel like your work has evolved? And like, while I'm sure there's moments throughout that process where like you get different inspirations, or things happen that kind of like change your perspective on certain things. I'd love to hear if there's maybe ever been like a major shift for you and how you tackle photography.
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. I feel there's been various shifts depending on different situations. And so I think the biggest shift for me actually was shifting to wedding photography. I would always consider myself an introverted person. And for my personal work, I always just shot landscapes because I didn't really like to interact with people. When I started to shoot weddings, when I first started to shoot weddings, I felt like I was still quite introverted, and that so I really pushed myself to, and I don't think introvert is necessarily the right word, just like quieter. So I pushed myself to be more outgoing so that I would shoot weddings in a better way, if that makes sense. So I feel like if you look at my early work, it was like very quiet landscapes, and now a lot of my work is like candid people, even in my personal work is still quite quiet, I think. Um, but yeah, it's definitely driven by the need to have to like do a job has it changed my photography. The interesting thing though is I found a photo that I shot when I was like 18. A lot of the a lot of the time uh when I'm editing my work, I like to put it in 16 by 9. And I found a
Mm,
photo the other day which I shot when I was 18, which was 16 by 9 in exactly the same composition that I would shoot now. And it's so interesting
interesting.
that it's
Wow,
like that many years, and it's like I could have shot that recently because it's so similar. Yeah. So I feel like the basis of it has always kind of been the same. But yeah.
that's fascinating. That's yeah, that's so interesting. Do you like do you look back at your old work with like fondness, or is there things that you like? Is there things you look at and you're like whatever I shot when I was 20, like do you still find like that was good, or do you find you look at it and you're like, wow, there's so many things that I could change about this.
I feel with my personal work, I still look back at it and I like it. I feel with commercial work or paid work, sometimes I look back at it because I think my commercial work has followed trends more, and my wedding work has definitely followed trends.
Mm,
And so sometimes I look back and I'm like, oh, like that is terrible. But I feel personal work, there's still photos, yeah, that I shot all those years ago that I still like. But yeah, I remember I did this one stock shoot, which was like business people like carrying a canoe in a quarry because I was like all like the conceptual ideas behind it. And like looking back at those photos, like they're so shockingly bad. Um, like, but yeah, there's so much early stock work which is horrendous. But no, yeah, it's interesting over 25 years how it really I don't think my style has changed that much. There's definitely you can see where certain influences came in when I was looking at certain things, and also certain photographers that I've been inspired by. You can see where it kind of loops in and then like kind of shifts out. And yeah, it is interesting.
That actually segues perfectly into the question I wanted to ask because I remember last time when we were working on that project for Nova Scotia Tourism, we were talking about kind of photography influences, and I remember you mentioned both Sam Abel and
Yeah.
Robert Frank and how much they've influenced you as a photographer. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about what you think they do so well and how maybe you and then other people as well could be inspired by their work.
Yeah. Um, so I think Robert Frank is an interesting one for me because he moved to Nova Scotia, which I think is what I said before. And so,
Yeah.
and Robert Frank's work, his book, The Americans, I mean, there's so many times where it's referenced as the most important photo book in the 20th century that it changed kind of the course of photography. Um, I feel like I love his work, but I don't know if it's inspired me, if that makes sense. I feel
Okay.
there's other people's yeah, I love his work and what he did, and I also his most recent book in Nova Scotia is so beautiful. But it's interesting to have that thought where you can find someone's work beautiful, and love it, but not have been as inspired by it. So, and also I think the reason why I'm saying this is because I treat inspiration instead of I treat inspiration in a very analytical way. So instead of it being me seeing something beautiful and thinking, I love that. I guess what I could say is Robert Frank's work makes me want to shoot. Sam Abel's work makes me want to shoot in a certain way. And so the thing about Sam Abel's work is that he's so good compositioning and so good using light that I get quite analytical when I look at it as to how he's composed, how he's used light, and then I almost like take notes on that and then weave that into my photography. And so I feel like that's almost the two different ways that you can use inspiration. There's one that makes you want to go out and like create, and one that actually makes you want to work in a certain way. And so throughout there's so many different photographers that I look at, and I feel like they probably kind of like split into those two groups of, and then there's also kind of artists and like even certain poetry. Like I feel like poetry tells stories in ways where it simplifies it down so much that it, like if you take a haiku or something like that, it's so simple, but it tells such a big story that it's a good way to then think in a photo, like how you can take everything out and make it really simple, but tell a story. So I feel like that's a like almost, yeah. a different way to be inspired.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it. I think too, like, oh, actually, sorry, I just had another thing come to my mind. I can't remember if it was you, but I remember I saw a story on Instagram, and it was like a documentary photographer who had recently passed away. For some reason, I want to say I saw it on your story, but it was like, yeah, it was a documentary photographer who recently passed away, and one of the quotes that he had that just like struck me, was something like, history is what is written down, my photos are what happened, or something like that.
That's so cool.
And
Yeah,
I
I don't think that was me. I wouldn't know who said that.
uh,
That's
yeah.
such a good.
I wonder who's, yeah.
All I
I'll
remember
Google
is
it
when he
afterwards.
told.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All I
yeah.
remember is when Ben told me, we were both like, "Wow, like that is the line." If you
Yeah.
had like if you had like a just do it for photographers, like that is it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a beautiful line.
Yeah.
That's
So
cool.
going back to weddings, I know you kind of, I mean, when we chatted, you kind of mentioned that there's a few crazy stories that you've had from your times in weddings. I'd
Yeah.
love to hear. I'd love to hear some of those, and also, have you ever had any like weird wedding requests where it's like they wanted you to do something in a very specific or odd manner?
Also, please,
Yeah.
please only share stories you're allowed to
Yes,
share. We
of
don't want to
course.
put you
I
under any
know.
pressure.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
I feel like the one story that I would love to share that I know I told you I don't think I will share.
Yeah.
We'll talk about
Very
another.
fair.
I think there's been
Yeah.
so many things that have happened at weddings over the years that are just like, I mean, crazy. Like, I'm trying to think of like more PG ones. I mean, I was taking family photos once, and the wedding had gone so wrong that basically we ended up doing family photos at 11 o'clock at night because everything had like gone behind timeline. I mean, they were scheduled for like 2 p.m., but then everyone kept on disappearing, and then we couldn't find certain people, and the groom went to walk the dog at like 8 p.m. and didn't come back. I know the whole thing was like bizarre, and everyone was like, "Where's the groom gone?" And then he like turned up, was like, "Oh, I was walking the dog," and they're like, "It's your wedding day, and you disappeared for an hour to walk the dog." Like it's kind of anyway. But by the time we got around to doing family photos, everyone was like not as like well put together as they were earlier. But the father of the bride was like kind of like toddling around like a little drunk and just like threw up into his hand. And I have the photo of him basically like had, and then this woman next to her who I don't even know what relationship she was to him, but she's just like this, and then there's this guy like throwing up his hand. Obviously, I never delivered the photo to them, but it's
Yeah.
been one of my ones. Yeah, actually, the other photo that I love that I'll send to you after this, but I was on I was shooting photos on the dance floor, and I feel like when I'm shooting I like largely follow like noise or sounds, like especially in like a party, like if you hear like cheering or something, like something's happening, so I'm like gonna go over there and see what it is. And it was kind of dark, and my eyes aren't the best in dark light through a camera, like I can never really see what's going on through the viewfinder. But there's these like six guys and like chanting like this, so I'm just shooting, and I have my camera in front of me and I'm just shooting. They're all like cheering, and then like everyone's like looks horrified and is kind of laughing, and I'm shooting and I'm like, I haven't got a clue what's happened. So then I like walk away and like I'm looking through the back of my camera, and basically what had happened was this guy had a glass eye, and he like took the glass eye out and put it on the end of his thumb and just like stuck it in front of the camera, and then there's like everyone's reactions behind. So the photo is his
Oh,
like
that's
thumb
cool.
forward, like glass eye on the end of his thumb, like obviously no eye in his socket, and everyone's like faces. So like it's like one of those images that is just like, and whenever I post it, everyone has been like what is actually happening, like whose eye is that? Like yeah. But yeah, this is one of those situations which I didn't know was going to happen, but it's like an entertaining photo. But I have a lot of those photos that are like just like so bizarre that you just can't imagine happen at weddings. But yeah,
Do you have like a folder of all the bizarre photos that you've, that you've
you know what's
taken
funny
of?
is that I have a really close friend who we like send photos back and forth to each other from weddings. So always whenever there's like an awkward moment and someone's like if I'm editing, I always like will send it to her and she'll send me the same. So my folder of photos is actually our chat history. Like I feel like anything's
That's
gone wrong
funny.
with weddings, it's like our chat history. But I need to put them in a folder. But yeah, if ever I need to show anyone one of these photos, then I know that I'll find it in our like message history.
That's hilarious. It's actually what maybe whenever you're older and you're out of the business, you can open up like a museum of like awkward wedding photography, and it's
Yeah.
like you can just like walk in and you're like, whoa. It's like and it's like suddenly like the like marriage drops in Canada by like 20% after that. It's like maybe I don't want to get married anymore. It's like I don't want that to be out anywhere.
Yeah.
It's actually funny. The one time that I took photos where I shot a wedding, I didn't stick around. Like, they basically were like, all right, this is all the photos we want. Like, you're good to go. And I was like, okay, great. And then I heard afterwards that the father of the bride had been doing a keg stand in the middle in the middle of everybody, just like they're all around him and just chanting him on. And I was like, damn it, I should have stayed.
Yeah. Yeah, whenever I've stayed late at a wedding, I've always got the craziest photos. Like I shot a wedding in Spain once and everyone got naked and jumped in the pool and I was still shooting and I can just remember like I was delivering photos but like editing the groom's like penis out of one of the photos when I delivered it because it's like he's like jumping in the pool sideways and it was such a good shot but I'm like I think it might be on my blog actually. There's that picture, but yeah, I like edited his penis out of it so I could like post it on my blog. But yeah,
That's funny.
so funny.
You just bring in like a PNG of a loincloth or something. And just...
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, late nights at weddings, like so much always goes down. It's funny. Yeah.
And so going back a little bit before wedding photography, I know you mentioned to us that you used to work in a ship. Or cruise ship, and I would love to hear some of the stories that you had from that because I know you mentioned some really fun, cool stories from that time.
Yeah. So when I went on the ship, I was going to go on as a photographer, and then I found out photographers didn't get as much time off. And so I went on, and I was still shooting stock photography at this time. So a lot of my stock photos were taken, like the cruise ship would go into various different ports. So then I just like shoot stock photos on the beach and then like submit them. But yeah, so I went on and I managed the shops on the ship. But yeah, I feel like it was just like a couple of years of like total chaos because the like inner workings of a cruise ship are like so different from what passengers see. But yeah, there was always so many things that go wrong and yeah, I can't remember what stories did I tell you? I feel like I have so many.
Okay, so there's one, and we can always cut this out if you're not allowed to tell the story. But the one that I remember is the ship catching on fire.
Oh, I mean, I feel like it's fairly common. Like, so yeah, so basically, the ship that I was on, and this is, I knew other crew members who'd been on other ships who had actually had worse fire situations. But the ship that I was on, the incinerator, because they burn all their own garbage, so they have an incinerator, and the incinerator somehow, I think the chimney caught light, and then it caught light to the room next door, like there was a storage locker or something. And so basically what they do is they all the crew then have to go to emergency stations. And this, I had only been on the ship for a couple of weeks. And the other thing on cruise ships is that the crew drink a lot. And although like basically the law on ships is you have to be drink drive limit. So if you're over drink drive limit, then you can get thrown off the ship. But largely they don't, they kind of like just ignore it a little unless someone is obviously like being too rowdy, being aggressive, whatever, and then they'll like breathalyze them and then those people kind of get disembarked. But anyway, I'd only been on for a couple of weeks and I was absolutely hammered because I was like, because the crew bar on ships is like 70 cents a beer. And so we had been drinking a lot. And anyway, they called us to emergency stations. And so we're all standing there at like 2 a.m. with the ship on fire. And I'm standing on the back of the ship with like a life jacket on, just like total panic. Because I'm like, is the ship gonna sink? But then I'm also drunk, so I'm also like if passengers need to be like assisted in like getting into lifeboats, like I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. But yeah, it's just yeah, there was a lot of occasions. There was another occasion with that ship. Oh no, the second ship I was on where and again, I probably shouldn't be telling these, but I mean, no one on cruise ships is going to be listening to this story.
This is actually sponsored by Expedia Cruise Ships.
But yeah,
Thank you, Viking Cruises, for.
That's our segue into our sponsorship.
That'd be amazing. Cruise with us. But yeah, we were on the ship and we were all again like partying at like midnight or like 2 in the morning, and we're on the crew deck was on the front of the ship, so we'd always kind of like hang out there and drink. And the ship like ran. We were in the Amazon. The ship like did this like giant lurch forward, and then like you could hear the engines like just go like high speed, and then just like lurch back off. And so then the next morning, I asked one of the officers on the ship, I'm like, "What happened in the middle of the night?" And he's like nothing. Like we were like, "What do you know?" And then basically what had happened is we had like hit a small island in the middle of the night. Like the Amazon, the
Oh my
river
God.
moves so much that these giant islands would just like be like 2 miles over from where they were the year before. And so they have all these like navigation maps, but often they're incorrect. And so they'll like bring in local pilots, and then they'll also have so there'll be like two local pilots and two ship pilots. And so they're all like basically concentrating on how to get this thing out the Amazon, but often they get it, well, not too often, hopefully, but they get it wrong. So yeah, we just beached it in the middle of the night, and then like basically they got it back off. But he said they were like, close to it being like a major issue, but because they went slowly and they like solved it, it was fine. But yeah, it's crazy. Cruise ships are like, I don't know, I would never go on a cruise ship now after having worked on one. But yeah, don't
Yeah,
cruise.
yeah, I've always kind of thought of like it's interesting. A cruise was always something that when I was younger I looked at and be like, oh my god, this like it's a city on a boat. That's so cool. And then as I got older, like I just never heard anything good. I just never heard anything good about cruises at all.
Yeah.
So I've completely changed except like I just meant those kind of like Viking river cruises because those are a little bit kind of like bougier in a sense where it's
More tame.
yeah, a little
Yeah.
more tame. So I wonder if those would be interesting. But
I
yeah,
think it's that, to be honest, at that time it was an amazing way for me to see so much of the world. Because I mean, that cruise with the
yeah,
Amazon, we left the UK, we went to the Caribbean, we went up the Amazon to Manaus, which is like if you look on a map, it's right in the center of South America. It's crazy. And then we went all the way down to Antarctica, like all the way up through the Chilean fjords, like Panama Canal. And so to like see all those places and to like experience it was incredible. But it was fun, but it was just the chaos of the cruise industry. They're also, I mean, they're so bad for the environment. That's on so many levels.
Hmm.
Like they don't stick to laws when they're at sea, so they like pollute heavily. And I mean, even with things like the pandemic, like now, I think anyone who cruises after the pandemic, like there was all those ships that were like off the coast of, I think it was like Florida or somewhere during the pandemic, and they weren't allowed to dock because they had COVID. And so there
yeah.
was like people stuck on ships for like a month, and yeah, I don't know. I feel like even more so now, I would never go near one.
Since you've got to see like so many different places, so many different things, you've also like correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I remember you saying that upon moving to Nova Scotia is like the first time you've lived somewhere for longer than a year since
Yeah,
you were since you were what? Since you were 18, 19?
yeah. So it's this house that we're living in now. We were talking about it the other day
Yeah.
because I think we're at like a year and a half in this house, but it's the longest I've ever lived in one house. But up to that point, like I lived in Ontario, I was in Ontario for quite a while. I feel like that was my most stable, although we moved houses like every year. But yeah, when I
Right.
was younger, I was so restless. So I was constantly like, I never did a job for more than like a year and a bit, or I never stayed in one place for more than a year, but I was kind of like, yeah, I moved on. Um,
So, so
Okay, sorry to cut you off. I just want to replace the battery on our camera
okay.
just so it doesn't die in the middle of
okay.
in the
Yeah,
middle of
fair.
this.
There's a music photographer called Andy Earl, and one of the guys that I used to shoot for was his assistant, and they went to do a job in Brazil, and they the film that they took with them was like they basically had a 617 like panoramic camera, and then they had just like normal 6.6 Hasselblads, and they took like I think it was like 40 rolls of they meant to take 40 rolls for the like Hasselblads and like 2 rolls for this panoramic camera, but they took 40 rolls for the panoramic camera and only 2 rolls for the Hasselblad.
Oh,
So they basically ended up shooting this whole job on 617.
oh,
And I can't remember. I think it's like U2 or someone. I'll send you a link to the photos. But basically, it was for album art for like U2, I think. And so the album art ended up all being like 617 panoramic because they were like, yeah, this is what we wanted to do. This is what we wanted to create because they didn't have the film for the camera they needed.
that's so funny. And
Yeah, it's crazy. So yeah, sometimes I feel like from the worst scenarios, you often get more creative stuff.
oh, totally. I know. Ben and I were actually talking about that, like literally right before the podcast, like when we first started taking photos. We were, I guess, not we were not bright enough to think that cameras needed an SD card. So we went out on this like whole hike, and then like 6 photos in, it was like, oh, like your thing is full, and we're like, it's full. What do you mean it's full? It's like I have this camera. Why is it full? It's like, isn't it supposed to take like thousands of photos? And we're like, well, I guess we only have 6 photos, so like let's erase them and make like the 6 best photos we possibly can. But yeah, stories like that, and it's funny too, because it's like you tell it to people and you're like, yeah, that was my intentional creative artist, throw all those words in.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, it's funny too. Like I remember the first time we tried taking a long exposure. We just went out during the middle of the day, no ND filter, and just cranked the shutter speed to like
1/30th of a second.
30 seconds.
Or 30 seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds. I was going to say, yeah. And then we were like, why is it just white? Why is the photo just coming out white? Like,
and then we thought the camera was the problem.
Yeah.
It's like we were at that point where we were so like oblivious to it that we were like, the camera must be the problem. Like we were doing exactly what YouTube told us to do.
Yeah.
It's like they never mentioned an ND filter. But
that's so funny. And what about when I was working for you and the whole like time lapse?
Oh yeah.
Video, and I'm like, I don't know how to do this.
It's like, well, I guess we'll Google it and figure it out. Actually, yeah, because
it's amazing, like so many different opinions as to how to actually.
Because we didn't have any data, right? Like we were in the middle of nowhere, so we couldn't actually get them.
Yeah, exactly. No, I can check because that's what I would have normally done is just be like, okay, let's Google this for the side. But I'm like, I haven't got a clue how to do this.
And then we were all like, all right, we'll figure it out together.
Yeah, it's like, let's just chill for an hour, like lie down on some rocks, and hopefully in an hour it turns out.
That was actually really nice.
Oh my god, I was so nervous for that. We're sitting there for an hour. I'm like, if I set this wrong after all of that, it would be such a
guys.
It was,
well, I was just gonna say, guys, time to sit back down for another hour. There were some clouds, I just want to redo it.
Yeah, I think we can do a better version of this. Oh my god. You feel like so much effort. I don't even know if they're using that, are they?
I have no idea.
I actually don't know. I just kind of send them whatever you send them, and whatever the revisions they had, I just sent to you. So yeah, I don't think I saw it, which is really funny.
I don't think they're gonna use it, which I think is hilarious because it was like I feel like all of us put so much effort into that shot, like carrying it all up there, like everything about it. It's so funny. But they are using one photo because there's a shooting star in one photo.
Oh really? Oh, interesting.
Right. I remember that. Yeah, because we were looking through
it. So they're using that one photo. So it made it worthwhile for that. But yeah, it's just fun.
Well, sometimes I find it funny on those kinds of shoots as well because, like, you aren't really 100% sure what the client's gonna want in the edit for us, for example. So like that whole scene that we did before we went to shoot that time lapse, I think one shot got used.
Yeah, we shot one shot.
Yeah, really? And it's like
one shot for about like 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay.
And that's funny because of all the stuff that I shot, that's what they picked the most of.
It's like, what? Wait a minute.
So there's other shots that like I feel like I spent more time on, and like there's some shots in there that I'm like, oh, I really like this shot, and it didn't get used. But from that set, there's like I think they used 27 shots of mine, and I think there's 9 from that set.
That's funny.
From just that, and I mean you guys lit it beautifully. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
But that's the thing is I mean I was just kind of shooting around you, and I feel like that was the point where I like did the least work. But that's so
funny.
Also, which I think is so funny. It's so interesting with that with what ends up getting used. And that was the same with stock photography. Like I would do these shoots where I'd spend like a lot of money on them, or like really like invest in them and like think about what I was doing, and then like there would be like one side shot from like a stupid self-portrait of me at the end of it, and then that self-portrait would then sell, and none of the shots that I like spent all this time and money on would do anything.
That's so funny.
Like, it's just so strange what sometimes works and what
it's kind of like whenever you look at anything that goes viral, like memes or photos or videos, and it's like nobody knows why. It's like sometimes somebody will tweet something, and for some reason other people are like, that's funny. let's like put this out to the world, and it becomes like a standard like meme, and you're like, how did that ever happen? It's like there's no explanation to any of it.
I sometimes I wonder about like, I don't know, a human civilization like 500 years from now. And let's say like everything goes to shit and the world, I don't know, we're back to sticks and stones and huts and all this kind of stuff.
This is very depressing.
Yeah.
Is everything okay?
I just try to be realistic here. But I wonder, it's like, just imagine you come across like this old dusty hard drive from like 2022, and you take and I don't know, you somehow look into it and it's just like Harambe. or like or like
that's what the aliens have.
Yeah,
They're like, wow, this was a weird civilization here.
it's like, who were these people?
But that's the interesting thing, though. Is like we can see like cave art and stuff like that, but no one's going to be able to get into any of the hard drives. So it's basically going to be a whole generation with nothing. So I feel like maybe we should like print out a whole bunch of memes on like archive so we can like.
Well, maybe instead of a wedding museum, we can have a meme museum in Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
It's like this meme like died in 2018. It's like 2003 to 2018. It's like never been used again.
Imagine just a bunch of kids just going to a museum in like 2500 and they just see like, it's like, and if you look here, kids, this meme was done by J_Schlapp at on Twitter in 2020. And they're just like, oh my god. Like, they're trying to like dissect the art of that meme.
Yeah, like English teachers go in and they're like, yes, like the yellow really speaks on how they felt through like while they were making this beautiful meme.
Oh man.
But
But it is an interesting thought to think what we're actually leaving the next generations. It's like, yeah, it's not. I mean, before us there was like such sophisticated art, and now we're like largely what entertains us is not to that level.
Well, that's actually an interesting point, because I've started to see a bunch of memes about like art in the 16, 17, 1800s, and it's these like beautiful paintings and just like intricate, beautiful
like
art pieces.
Statue of David.
And that, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then they're just like art in the 21st century, and it's like some dude standing over a blank canvas and like spinning a bucket of paint. It just splatters everywhere. And I'm just like, wow, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
I actually wonder why. Like, I wonder if there's an explanation to like why, like, art is such a. Again, art is so subjective, but it's like everybody can look at like the Statue of David and be like, this is a masterpiece. But it's like so many people look in like modern art, and you're like, that's 3 circles. It's like why, how, like what's the whole thing here? I would actually love to ask you, what are your thoughts on modern art?
So I think the thing about modern art is that it has to move someone. And so I actually had a really interesting, or I had a debate with my dad about this, because there's not, have you heard of Tracy Emin?
That name sounds familiar.
She's an English artist, and she basically, her most famous piece was her unmade bed. And so it was in this art gallery, and it was basically her bed that she took from her house, put it in the art gallery, and it's her unmade bed. And basically her art is about femininity and how like versus the patriarchy and like various things. And there's a lot of like very like deep kind of like themes to her work. But my dad is like, she just put an unmade bed in a gallery. How is this art? And basically, so the response to that is that for some people who have experienced what she experiences or has experienced, and it's very moving. For my dad, who is like, older white dude who like no feminine side to him, it's like what is this like crap? And so I think that's the thing, is that art is so subjective to different people that some people are moved by things that others of us can't even comprehend. And so I find it so fascinating how And sometimes when you stand in front of a piece of art that you don't think is going to move you, it can move you in a way that you don't expect. And so, yeah, I feel like it's really is like understanding different humans and how they view things. And I think that's the thing about like if you look at Picasso's progression of how he painted a portrait. Not that I'm a massive Picasso fan, but it's just interesting how like he saw things so differently as he grew older. And it's almost that we can like see through those people's eyes when they view the world in a different way.
Yeah, that
Um,
makes sense. I mean,
yeah.
I remember when I was younger, my dad took me. What?
Yeah. No, Mike is correct.
It spun back.
Oh, never mind.
Anyway, anyway, when I was younger, my dad and I went to Florida. We actually went to see a hockey game, but there's a Salvatore Dali museum there, and what I found, like, at that point in my life, I had absolutely zero appreciation for art whatsoever. Like, the
Yeah.
last thing I wanted to do was walk through a museum and stare at some paintings. Like, that to me was the most boring thing ever.
Yeah.
But there was some, like, that changed everything to me because it was really interesting. Like, a lot of his paintings you would look at from like 15 feet away and they would look like one thing. Then you move 5 feet forward and they look like something completely different. And then you move 5 feet forward again and they look again like something completely different. And like what you're saying there about how, like, depending on your perspective and depending on, like, honestly the way that you've lived your life and the things you've experienced, like, can shape the way that you view art. I think even in a sense like that, where he wanted people to view his paintings in different ways. I think it's just like, it's just really fascinating how one piece can speak to people in a different way, and also how, like, you as an artist can even sometimes make people see a painting in a different way. Yeah.
Totally. And sometimes people's art has a different meaning for people than the artist ever intended,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
which is also, yeah, which is also so fascinating. Yeah. And I think that's the thing is you can call it art as long as it moves someone somewhere. Or even if someone like someone felt moved enough to create it, then it is art. It's just like, yeah. And also going back to like experiencing it in a museum, I feel like we look at so much on screens that sometimes like I remember like I've never liked not never liked but never been felt moved by any of Van Gogh's work at all. Like I'm like I've people have it's always fascinating me how much people have loved it and I've just kind of been like yeah it doesn't do anything for me. And then I think it was maybe 3 years ago I saw there's a self-portrait, a blue one of him. uh I can't really describe more than that. It's a blue
Yeah.
self-portrait of him, and I saw it in a museum, and like I stood in front of it, and it like almost made me want to cry, and I like couldn't explain why. It was just like so moving, like it was such a his expression in it was so sad, and obviously knowing the like how he felt and his mental health and stuff, and it was just like in that instant, like I suddenly felt like this huge emotional rush inside me, and I remember walking away from it thinking like I've spent the last like 20 years being like completely uninspired, completely moved by any of his work, and just being like, yeah, I don't get it. And then this piece was just like, for some reason, I was just like totally blown away by it. And so, yeah, and I think that's the other thing is sometimes you have to experience art in person to like, and then sometimes you're just in a certain place, you're feeling a certain way one day that this piece of art is just like, whoa, like that's
No,
crazy.
it's very true, and it's
Yeah,
also
it's cool.
it also really depends on your mood, right? Like maybe if you went there another day, it's like you wouldn't have felt anything, but maybe there was something, just something, kind of like from how you felt, whatever everything that you known until that point, and that was also kind of a part of it and that affected you. But it is very fascinating how, like, in person is. I feel like everything in person is just so different, and I feel like, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced it with COVID as well. It's like not being able to see people or like doing things over Zoom. It's like
Hmm.
it's just not the same as doing things in person. And especially as you mentioned, yeah, with like art, it's like I feel like I was never a person who was like super into like drawings or art or in general. And then once when Ben and I went to Europe, and it's like, you know, you go to the Louvre or you go to all these places, and suddenly, like, I don't know. It's like you can see the paintbrushes, the strokes, and suddenly it's like you're like, whoa, this is real. Like somebody 300-400 years ago drew that. Like that is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing, like we were talking about David earlier, like if you look at a picture of it, it's cool. But if you like stand next to it and you're like, like look at this, like someone hand carved this. Yeah, it is. It's unreal.
I
Yeah, it's especially.
It's funny too. Who are we? I think it was last night we were talking. We had dinner with I guess a colleague, someone in the creative industry here in Halifax, who's from China, and it was really interesting to talk to him about like Mandarin and the way that like ancient Chinese calligraphy, because the and I didn't know this before last night, but basically like the language when it's written is like it's a visual representation of something. So it's like it's hard to describe. Like, you know, in English, for example, like if I write my name, it's just like 3 letters. But when you write in like this ancient Chinese calligraphy, like you're legitimately putting like symbols that represent something together to create like different meanings.
So the best way he described it that I think made the most sense to us is if you look at like ancient Egyptian writing, like you know how like if it's a bird, they would literally draw a bird. So that's kind of what I guess ancient Chinese or even like modern Chinese is like.
Yeah, but and then like the way that you pronounce things, like you could say the same word 3 different ways and it means 3 different things, and it's I don't know.
And the way he described it was cool as well. He was like the way Chinese is spoken is like a song. He's like, imagine if you're singing something and you're out of tune. That means you're now singing something else. So, and that's kind of what he was saying. He literally like told us as well. Like, again, I'm not gonna try and repronounce what he was saying, but like, there's a sentence he said, and it literally is the same word, but different like not even enunciations, like different tones. Like he'll go up in one, he'll go down in one, and it just means 2 different things. Which is like, what? It's like, and then you look at English and you're like, L means L, and that's all it is. It's like there's no hidden meanings behind anything.
Well, it's interesting because there's like, it's a very direct language, so it's great for like direct forms of communication, like we're doing right now. But if you want, like he was talking about how, like let's say you were writing a poem, like there's just so much more to that poem if it was to be written in the calligraphy rather than like in English, whereas English is literally it's the word, right? Like you're just reading the word, whereas these symbols could mean different things. So you just
so it's like so visual as well as like there's so much more behind it. That's so
Have you ever been to China or anywhere in Asia?
I've been to Hong Kong when I was younger, and then I did the classic Thailand trip.
How'd you find it?
Which was more about like swimming and alcohol than absorbing the culture. Unfortunately, I was younger and but I do. I feel like number 1 on my bucket list at the moment is Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's, I have a friend who used to be a photographer and is now a clothing designer, but whenever he goes back and like the images he takes are just so beautiful. Like I feel like the fabrics and just like the colors, and I don't know, there's something about it. I'm so intrigued. So that's number 1 of them.
Yeah, I we actually have another colleague of ours who Japan is like his favorite place in the world. He's visited a few different times, and he always takes his film camera along with him, and just seeing the images that he posts, I don't know what it is. There's just something about the way that they feel going back to that. It's just incredible. And I don't know, maybe it's because like here in North America, like our culture and society is so young, and there's just it doesn't have that depth the way that it does over there.
Like I feel
Yeah.
like any picture you see like of Japan, it's like you're like, this is history. It's like
Yeah.
you look at something and like this has historical significance, no matter where you look, what
Yeah.
photo you take. But it's like, yeah, as Ben mentioned, it's like here, you go out, downtown Halifax, and it's like okay, cool. I guess this downtown has been around for a little bit, but it's like it doesn't have that history that Japan would have.
And also, I feel like the culture has is the whole ethos of that anything you do, like if you're starting a business, you're starting a business for 100 years. Like if you're like building a house, that house is meant to be there for like, 300 years. Like everything is considered with the path that it has in the future. Whereas I feel like North American culture is just a kind of a throwaway culture. Like that we build things to like, fall apart. Our clothing is not necessarily designed to last longer than, 6 months that it is in fashion. And so yeah, I feel like they have that whole culture has that depth. But then they also have the culture of like 60-hour work weeks
Yeah.
and things like that, which I
Yeah,
feel
it's like
like I'm less of a
Yeah.
you win
Yeah.
some, you lose some.
yeah.
And actually,
Yeah,
speaking of all the travel, I know one of the things that fascinated me about you is the fact that uh, other than your wedding photography, usually in the wintertime when it's a bit more quiet and you might not have as much work, you usually travel for a significant period of time to places like you just came back from Costa Rica, Mexico, and other places as well. Uh, what is that like for you? Just because the reason why I ask is because I feel like, especially in the creative space, and we've struggled with it, and we've talked to a lot of creatives who struggle with the same thing, where you feel like you constantly need to improve and get better, and it's like kind of hustle in a way, and continue doing that over and over and over again. And I know recently we've been getting more feedback of people being like, yeah, like honestly, sometimes it's probably better for you to just take a step back. It's like you also have a personality, you're also a human, you have hobbies, you have other things that can then be brought into your creative. So I'd love to know kind of what your outlook on all of that is.
Yeah, it's I feel like there's so many different things that I could take out of that question, but I feel like whenever you go somewhere new, you experience that place, but then when you come back, you experience your place more. Does that make sense? And so, the one of the things I love about travel is coming home, which sounds so crazy, but I mean, even this time, the first night we were back here in Nova Scotia, we noticed like how like beautifully quiet it is here, especially where we are down here, and just how um the things that become very normal to you, you then like see completely differently. So I feel that's always been my number one reason for traveling is to like experience other cultures because then you see yourself better than you and your life better than you ever have before. Um, but yeah, I also when I was younger I used to travel a lot more. I feel as I've got older, like I almost like to go away for shorter times just to like get that jolt. And then also interestingly, I feel like I used to be more creative in my work when I traveled, and now I feel like I'm more creative in a place that is, yeah, like here. Like I was excited to come back and like start shooting again, whereas I wasn't as excited to create down there because I felt like it didn't feel how I wanted to, if that makes sense. And actually, I have a friend who was down in Costa Rica with us this year, and she paints these beautiful landscapes of Ontario. And whenever she's down there, they normally spend like 3 months down in the winter. She finds it so hard to paint. Like she'll try and paint like local landscapes, she can never do it.
Interesting.
And then as soon as she's home, she just has this like burst of like inspiration where she's like, the moment she's back, she's like straight back into the studio and like really inspired to paint again, which I also think is interesting. But she also feels the same that it's that coming home that makes her like, yeah, re-see things and reignite the kind of spark.
That's
Um,
fascinating.
so yeah, I think a change is always so good.
And also,
Yeah.
like how do you go about the idea that if you're like, how do you go about the fact that you're not working? Like, did you ever have like initially when you started doing stuff like that it's like you're like, am I missing on work or clients? Like, am I missing on clients? Am I missing on money? Am I missing on this? Like if I'm not working, somebody else is taking my clients. Like, did you ever have that in mind when you initially started going on those trips?
So so I think that this is actually something that I like feel quite strongly about. I feel like we view success in the wrong way. I feel that we view success as the clients we're getting, the money we're making, um, and how we're pushing our business forward. But I view success as the time that I have to do what I want, and and my health. And so essentially, for me, and also I'm lucky because wedding photography, I can schedule it into certain months. So if I'm like, if I'm not going to work this month, it doesn't matter because I know I will work these kind of 3 months. But yeah, I feel like for me, it's trying to give myself as much time in life as possible because it goes so quickly. I mean, I still, I mean, I'm 41 now, and I feel like the last 20 years since I was 21 have like flown by. And some of those years, I didn't do anything for myself. And if I had gone through and done like 20 years of nothing for myself, then by the time you get to 60 and retire, and then you're going to start to do the things for yourself, then you might not even be alive. So it's for me, it's like life is to be lived. And so to me, it doesn't matter if I miss clients. Like I've definitely been away and had jobs come up that would have been really good. Or like, or if I've missed weddings because I was gonna do something else. And but at the end of the day, if you're like doing something that like enriches you and like gives you pleasure, then it doesn't matter. And I mean, actually, that was another one of my big reasons for moving to Nova Scotia, is that housing and like price of living in Ontario is so big that I was having to work more in order to live there. Whereas here, and especially like we're way down on the South Shore, so here we have the luxury that we don't have to, like our cost of living is so little that we can focus more on doing what we want to do. And so to me, that's success, is like balancing it that way. Um,
Yeah, I think that's. I mean,
yeah,
that sounds like a very healthy way of looking at things. I mean, I
yeah,
I think I think it's like it's interesting too when you do something that you really enjoy doing for a living. Is it's hard to not get caught up in just doing that. Like you were saying earlier,
agreed.
Ilya,
Yeah,
is like you're always like, oh, I want to do something better. I want to do something more. I want to do like I need to keep pushing. I need to keep pushing. But like if you really think about it, that that extra little bit that you're gonna push it is not gonna make that much of a difference at the end of the day. Like you need to have something outside of what you do to balance it out because otherwise you burn the candle on both ends and then yeah.
yeah.
And also,
Yeah, I feel agree. And also, I feel like the creative mind is like seasons. Like you can't run summer the whole time. Like you have to, and sometimes. So when I maybe like 10, 15 years ago, if I wasn't creating anything, I would beat myself up about it. I'd be like, why am I not feeling creative? Like, why am I not inspired to do anything? And I'd like get upset about it and kind of like go down that kind of path. Now, if I have a month or 2 months where I don't feel creative, I just don't create. Like I don't try and push it, and then I find that then a spark reignites for some reason. But I think acknowledging that you have to rest and rest a lot will make you more creative. And if you look at like if you look at very well known artists or even very well known like photographers, like some of them, I mean, someone like Robert Frank created 300 incredible images in a lifetime. And I have a friend who actually his goal is to create 25 incredible images in his life. Like that's his only goal. It's just 25 images. And I think sometimes acknowledging that you I think today's society is like we're constantly trying to like put out as much stuff as possible and work as much and do as much. But I think sometimes if you like take a little back and just be like, if someone was to like look back at what I've given or like created, like if you look at someone like Van Gogh, I mean, there's like 40 paintings that we know really well. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be like a huge quantity of work. It just has to be a beautiful quantity of work. So I'd rather let myself like rest and know that it's that some point in that year I'm going to create something beautiful, but it doesn't have to be throughout the whole
and
year.
speaking on that, is there have you ever thought of what legacy you would like to live or leave?
It's an interesting one. I never used to think about it, but I think it's interesting for me to like go into like uh, clients' houses and see my work. Because the photos that they pick are not necessarily the most creative work, but it's just like being able to give people beautiful moments of their history is kind of like is huge. Yeah. I actually I have there's a on my website I have one story which was I have this picture of a groom hugging his Omer at a wedding, and essentially the story behind it, which I didn't know. I took the picture, and then um, I think it was a year later, his mum emailed me, and basically the what had happened was his grandfather had been taken off life support on the morning of the wedding, and his grandmother wasn't going to come to the wedding, but then she decided that she did, and then the photo that I took of them hugging was the moment that she basically came to the wedding. The groom didn't know she was going to be there. And so it's like, but I feel like photos like that, like to give that to someone, even without knowing the story, is such a huge legacy. And no, I don't even think of it as like me necessarily like that I want to leave a legacy, but it's nice that those things are kind of out in the world.
Yeah, totally. I love the way you put that. Do you think like when you, I don't know, let's say like in fast forward 50 years and you're
90.
yeah, you're about to kick the bucket.
Yeah.
91, yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I was going to call you out on this earlier when you were like, yeah, in 50 years we'll be great. I was thinking in 50 years I'll probably be dead, but you'll be great.
I mean,
Hey,
No, I think for me, let's say in 35, 40 years.
sure. But I was just thinking, there's a lot of technological innovation. You never know what's going to
you're
happen.
still surfing, you're still in great shape. So
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah, exactly. You never,
Yeah, hopefully.
you never know. How do you like, let's say apart from necessarily just the photography side of things, but how would you like to look back on your life? Like, what to you, when, if you could maybe, or if you could try and put yourself in that place, if you were to look back, like what to you would be a life well lived?
Just honestly, and it sounds kind of like hedonistic, but like that I enjoyed it. Like that I feel like that's my only thing. Like that I spent good time with good people and experienced it, ate good food, visited good places. Like yeah, I feel like as I've got older, that is my only priority. And so and I love like I'm lucky that I work in the creative industry and I love my job, but I think that the thing that gives me the most satisfaction is living. Like it's yeah. I'm interested to turn that around to both of you. Like how would you answer that?
Oof.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, how the turntables. I think for myself,
with our many years of experience.
yes, my many.
But it's an
Question,
interesting
yeah.
question because it would be interesting to revisit it in 10 years, the same question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think currently, it's definitely changed a lot over the past few years. I think I would like to look back and just know that I've like I really want to look and see like my family, and like yeah, see like maybe my grandkids and that kind of stuff, and just like the family that I've like helped support and bring up, and I think that means a lot to me.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I mean, if we're gonna connect it to work at all, I mean, I'd just love to look back and know that my work had an impact on people, and hopefully help people.
Yeah.
I think I'm kind of more on your side, Hugh, where it's definitely like life is there to be lived, and it's like you want to experience the things that you want to experience. So it's like if you want something, just go do it, and it's like there's no reason to wait. There's no reason to kind of. It's like just go. Yeah, it's like because you never know what's gonna happen tomorrow, right? And like I think the one reason why because we initially started in photography, and I feel like video takes the same realm for me, but when it comes to photography, the reason why I liked it so much and the reason why I still love it is the fact that every single image that you ever take has a story. You can look at every single photo that you've ever taken, and to everybody else, it's like, oh yeah, this is just a picture of the ocean, but you're like, but yeah, like that day I surfed and it was really warm, and I had this beer, and I was doing this and that, and the surfboard broke. It's like nobody else knows that but you, and I think that's the coolest thing about their job is the fact that you can look back at every single picture project that you've ever worked on, and every single one of them has a story. But yeah, just to go back, it's like I feel like I think my favorite thing, other than living life to the fullest, hopefully, is also be able to share that with other people and be able to bring people together and be able to show people that it's like things like for example, even for me and Ben, it's like we dropped out of school, we started a company. It's like that like most people would not do that because they're either scared or actually scared of failure, right? And I think the biggest thing that I've been learning over the last few years is the fact that failure is not really, it's very arbitrary, right? It's like I know my partner kind of said something a few days ago. She was like, do you know how people look at failure in San Francisco when it comes to like tech companies? They just view it as, oh, like I just learned something new. Let me just apply it to the next job. Let's move on. And I feel like that's the best thing. That's the best way to apply that to life. It's like there is no such thing as failure. It's like literally a worst case. If tomorrow all of our clients left us and me and Ben are not friends anymore, it's like worst case scenario. It's like I'll be fine. I'll go find something else. I'll go do something else. Like this is like nothing is set in stone. It's just about having fun with what you do.
What's the quote? It's like I haven't failed. I've just found 1,000 ways that don't work.
I think it was Thomas Edison.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
But yeah,
no, that is so true. It's such a good way to look at it because I think unfortunately so many people look at it, at life as like you have to succeed in some way, and that failure is not a good thing.
As you mentioned,
and so then they're scared, and so they stay doing things that don't really do anything.
And as you mentioned, dude, it's like for a lot of people, it's all about like money and showcasing things, and like the usual. It's like like family, health, all that stuff. It's like
Bugattis.
Yeah, but I think like the main thing that people, I think the main thing that people just forget about is the fact that like none of that stuff. Like most things at the end of the day don't matter if you're not happy. It's like you could have a great family, you could have a great job, but it's like if you're not happy and not doing things you like, if you're there like regretting not going on a trip, it's like nothing else really matters, right? It's at the end of the day, it's like you have to be selfish to enjoy life.
I disagree with that.
Totally.
I disagree with that. I think it's the opposite. I think you need to have. I think people are very unfulfilled without a good family, and I think if you're very selfish in what you do, then when you look back and you're alone on your deathbed with no loved ones around you, then you're not going to look back and think good of your life.
Well, I mean, like selfish in a way where you're not giving, it's not like you're hating on other people. It's like you want to make sure that you're happy. It doesn't mean that other people are unhappy.
Yeah, but also going back to that, I think that your family is not necessarily just blood ties.
No, that's I just meant in general, like not having a group of people around you that like love and care about you. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
and I agree with that. Like I feel like life is so much about what you give to the people around you and what they give to you. Is that kind of like life is about relationships.
Yeah. That was
sure.
Sorry, I think I misspoke there. It's just having people around you who you can love and cherish and support, I think is much more valuable than going on a trip to Spain or something like that.
Yeah. But if you go on that trip to Spain with the people you
love, that's the killer combo right there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's the other thing is when I was younger, I used to travel a lot by myself, and I feel like travel with people you love is like, so this time in Costa Rica, there was like, we had a group of 8 friends down there who like we usually hang out with, and I feel like that, like traveling with people you love and enjoy the company is like,
it makes such a difference. And I feel like I don't know if it's the same thing for you actually, but both for me and Ben, it's like, especially over the last little bit, it's like once we traveled Europe, it's like it's like not like we've seen the entire world, but it's like you've seen a lot of things, right? And at that point, it's not really about the places that you go, but it's about the people that you spend time with. It's like you could go, like we were in Hawaii and we were like, it's like, it's okay, but it's like, it's cool and everything, but it's like, it's about the things that you do with the people that you meet. It's not really about the actual place anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's about.
Yeah,
I
100%.
mean, like if, for example, we did this crazy hike in Hawaii that like nearly killed us in like 5 different ways, and
The haiku stairs. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's like the
No, I'll
it's
look
like
it up
the
before.
hike, which
it's closed now.
I think now it's like
Yeah,
well, it technically was closed. It was I think it was like a $5,000 fine if they catch you. Uh, so it was like
Yeah.
already illegal to do.
but I think they took the stairs down now.
I think
I
so
think is
too.
what they did. Anyway, regardless, like it wouldn't be nearly as memorable if we hadn't done it together and shared that experience together. Because you wouldn't be
Yeah.
able to kind of like, yeah, if you can't share in the experience, then there's no like, I don't know, it just feels a lot emptier. Yeah.
Yeah. And looping it all the way back around, that is my job, is I get to show people them sharing the experience.
Which is like,
Because basically that's what I'm delivering is like intimate emotional moments. And that's what I'm always aiming for most of my work is showing intimate emotional moments between people. And that is honestly is yeah, is the key to life. And that's why I think that's the reason why I love my job so much is that that's basically what I do is I show people how they feel about each other.
so to wrap things up, I think what I'd like to ask is we typically ask all of our guests is, um, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to pursue a creative career and live their life on their own terms, but don't really know where to start?
Other than buying 7 surfboards, because that's the start. It's like if you wanted to get into creative career, it's like at least like 5 is the minimum.
Oh my god.
Um, the number one thing is persist. I think is the only thing. And I mean, it goes back to the failure thing. I think when I the yeah, if you want to do something, then like just keep persisting. And I feel the things like the skills and I feel like this is key for you for who you two are and how like I've seen how you've described what you've done is that you don't necessarily need the skills. You don't to start off with. You don't really need anything. The only thing you need is the key to like persisting. And I feel that that's what you did. It's like for those early jobs, you're like, well, we don't really know what we're doing here, but we're going to do this, and then from that you learn the skills. But if you had taken that first one and not persisted, then you wouldn't now be where you are now. And that's exactly the same with my career. Like there's been times when it could have been so easy for me to be like, this just isn't working. I'm not gonna keep doing this. And even like the move out here, like it's just like every day, like keep trying, keep trying, keep trying, and then you will like everything else will just fall into place. Um, yeah, so that would be my number one piece of advice: never give
What
up.
what inspired you to be persistent? Like why? Because a lot of people are not, and that's where I mean, again, as you mentioned, it's like that is so important because if you don't have if you do something for 50 years, I'm assuming at the end of the day you're probably gonna succeed. But it's like why
Exactly.
did you
Yeah.
persist? Because I know a lot of people kind of that's where they draw the line.
Simply because I can't work for anyone else. Like I'm so bad at being an employee, and I love what I do, and I also want to like live my life on my terms. And so for me, there isn't another option. Like I feel like if this doesn't, uh, did you hear my cats fighting?
No,
No, no.
Oh, fantastic. Um, they just ran in the room and like shut it right
that's
into the
hilarious.
Um, yeah, no, I feel like where was I? Don't remember that train of thought. But yeah, no, I have to work for myself. So if in the future that like wedding photography is no longer working for me, then I will like I feel like I'm always just going to persist and make it work because it just has to. Like there isn't, and I'm not a particularly driven person. I wouldn't say that I'm goal motivated, apart from the fact that I want to live my life on my terms and I want to do this job. So it's just there is no other option. Like it just has to.